Everybody. Greetings, everybody. I'm Salvador Cordova, and I'm privileged to be joined by Danny, who is you're a philosophy teacher. Is that correct?
Yeah, I teach philosophy. I have a bachelor's in philosophy, and I'm getting my master's. And right now, so I'm a graduate student getting a master's in philosophy.
Well, thank you. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the debate last night and explore some scholarly things. So,
well,
welcome everyone for joining us in this channel. And I know there's some things on Danny's heart. Would it be okay, Danny, if I just kind of gave a few reflections on the talk last night?
Of course, go ahead.
First off, there was no agreement what version of Pascal's debate, Pascal's wager was going to be debated. And that was perfectly fine with me. And even Matt Dillahunty has admitted, and I believe even in the debate, that there are various even colloquial versions of it. So he was trying to discount the version I was going by reverting back to Pascal's original wager. And I wasn't quite quick enough to just say, no, that's not my version. And I should have said we didn't agree on which version we're going to debate. So, but, he was spending more time screaming at me. And that was just like, okay, this isn't about any sort of in-depth conversation. The guy's treatment of the subject matter is pretty shallow, which is often the case in debate. But even in the situation of a debate, you ought to try to at least think a little more clearly. And, he's just conducting himself like he's on his radio show and he can just scream at people and hang up on them. And it's not much of an intellectual exchange of information. And so there was one point when I did laugh at him, and I know that was kind of mean, but when he said, I made a living off of poker and craps, he later did correct himself to his credit. He said, well, I made a living poker. I do craps for fun. But the way he said it, it sounded like he actually, if you just take the words that he said before he corrected it, I laughed because I said, I got the guy now if he's going to say something stupid as that. And we're talking about wagering. I said, this guy's out of his depth. And and then there's still that thing I said, well, what I wanted to point out is what would count as evidence. And so I specifically referred to the passage in John 9. I said, what if this happened to you? And that was relevant because there are two other examples I gave. One in Pascal's own life, where his beloved niece got healed of blindness. That is like that's relevant. And Matt was saying, he gave that list of all my points of evidence that I put forward. And he said, that's irrelevant. And I would say, no, I don't think so. But I guess that's a quick way to avoid having to actually deal with substantive arguments. And I cited scientific papers. So let me see. There was one other thing I wanted to say. Oh, yeah. And I pointed out Charles Duke. So what I was trying to do by that is I was trying to show the Christians, I said, this guy, he's posing himself as rational. And to a lot of people that don't have prospects. And there are a lot of people, know what I mean, when they feel they've run out of options. And what's it like when someone comes along? Just imagine yourself in that situation of the blind beggar. And you get healed, something you didn't ask for. And the guy tells you he's the Messiah. You could choose to disbelieve. But would you worship this man? And would you express gratitude? So it was kind of hard to hear what Matt's response was because he was just flying off the handle. And I said, okay, if that's the way you win debates, by just flying off the handle, cutting off discussion, it's like, okay, that's why I don't like debates that much. This channel is organized more to have scholarly discussions. And that's why I invited you, Danny. So
I appreciate it. So there's a lot to say here, but one of the most kind of the most obvious issues with the opening of that debate last night was Matt's claim that it's the worst argument against the existence of God. So that says a lot. Well, number one, whether you're a theist or an atheist, or or whether you accept the wager as being something that worth considering, there's a lot you can learn from what Pascal is saying, or the general idea of what Pascal is saying, right? It's rich with topics, right? Now, the first thing is that Pascal was writing to the agnostic, not to the atheist. Okay. Now, there was a bit of a mischaracterization that Dillahunty made when he said, well, Pascal thought that you could know God, right? There's no way that he was unknowable, right? Well, this is technically truth, but this is a half truth, right? Pascal was not really so much convinced with all the standard philosophical arguments for the existence of gods. That included Aquinas' 5 ways, Anselm's ontological argument, and the way he characterized all of the sea of reasons for an existence of God, he characterized it as chaotic. Okay, and I think that an interpretation to be had here is that the evidence or the reasons, the philosophical inquiries, the experiences that one has is just simply overwhelming. Okay, and many don't have time to get a PhD in philosophy or PhD and experimental philosophy, or philosophy of science, and getting into all these topics. They just don't have the time, and so they're overwhelmed, right? So what Pascal means here by saying that God is unknowable is that he doesn't think there's a reason, or there's overall greater reason to accept God or a greater reason to deny God, right? He looks at it as a thing that can't be decided by quote unquote reason. Now, there's an important concept here, which is reason. Dillahunty was kind of mistreating the term in the context of Pascal. There are many kinds of reasons, right? When he demanded of you, right, give me a reason that I should believe. Give me evidence. Demonstrate. What Dillahunty is asking for is what we call an epistemic reason, right? A justification as to establish a knowledge, right? But there are different kinds of other reasons, right? There's prudential or practical reasons. So if I want to go to work, I should drive my car. That's not an epistemic reason. There's moral reasons, right? If it's true that I ought not lie, right? That's a reason not to lie, right? That's not an epistemic reason. So now what Pascal is focusing on here is prudential or practical reasons. He thinks that the epistemic set of reasons are not going to help us in this case. Okay? So when he flung the thing about, oh, well, do you know Matt Pascal thinks that you can't know God? Well, actually, yeah, technically, but he also thinks that you can't know atheism to be true, right? He doesn't think that it's an epistemic issue. Now, we might disagree here, right? Many Christians disagree about that point, but the takeaway here is that many people are faced with a position where their epistemic reasons for one and for the negation of that proposition are equally weighed, right? Whether it could be a mountain of evidence or reasons to accept one and a mountain to accept the negation of that, or no, they're not familiar with the topic and they don't have epistemic reasons for one or the other. The point is the same, that people are faced with a position where they don't feel like they have a justification going one way or another. So then enters the arena the practical or prudential reason, right? What is best for my life here? What is going to be most practical to believe in, right? How am I going to function as a human being? Is there utility with respect to these belief systems, right? So that's going to be something to consider if it's the case. Go ahead.
If I could ask, you see, I defined Pascal's wager as how should we then live? That was my very first slide. Would that fall into the prudential?
Absolutely, right?
Yeah, and see, that's how I defined it. But see, I didn't know those philosophical terms, but I was just saying, how should we then live?
Right.
And I couldn't believe, he was trying to anyway, he had his way of trying to win the debate and trying to define the rules. as I said, there was no formal agreement what version of Pascal's wager was actually going to be discussed.
But
And
all versions of Pascal's wager, all versions ignore the epistemic reason, right? They're concerned with what's practical
prudential.
or the prudential. No, all versions are concerned with that. So for him to demand an epistemic reason is to change the entire topic of the debate. Okay? And when you cited your own reasons, I think you had a slide. There's a problem of evil on one side, and there's all these issues on abiogenesis and when you did that, that was okay because there are PhD, very well-informed people that are in this position where they know all the arguments for and against the existence of God, but they don't. Those reasons are not enough to motivate one over the other, right? So, go ahead.
First off, just an administrative thing. I want to acknowledge everyone especially who's new to this channel and participating in the chat. So thank you. And there's Johnny Jack Kuleg. Apologies if I mispronouncing your name, but thank you for joining us. Go on, Danny. Sorry I interrupted you.
So that was the first thing for him to sling. Oh, did you know Pascal thinks we can't know God? That was a good exemplification that he does not know what he's talking about with respect to what Pascal was getting at, right?
Yes. And if I could point out one thing, there's something on the screen here, because in the same treatise, what they call Pascal's thoughts, or
it starts with a P.
So here's something very interesting. I mean, if we're going to, and honestly, because we didn't agree that we were going to actually talk about, I would have declined a debate if we were going to do Pascal's original formulation of the wager, because one, it's very hard to discern what he actually meant.
He is hard to interpret. He is actually very difficult to interpret.
And I'm just like, okay, so he was really trying to hammer all the pieces, and that's one reason I thought it's just going to be pointless to go back. But after the debate, I said, let's just see what Pascal thought of miracles. And if we look at this passage, it says here, I'm not saying I agree. Let's just see what Pascal had to say. He said, presumably he is echoing Augustine here. He said, I should not be a Christian, but for the miracles, said Augustine. And I'm assuming he's sympathetic to that. And in the prior sentence, he said, had it not been for the miracles, there would have been no sin in not believing in Jesus Christ. I don't necessarily agree with that, but there is the point that it's not that Pascal was not trying to say that we don't consider evidence.
Well, it's
now in light of this, I'm just like, Matt, this doesn't look good for the way you're characterizing his wager. What I presented here, is more in line than with the way I approached it. And then you can go back only maybe 800, maybe about 600 small sentences before. And that's where the wager is put forward. The wager is put forward, it looks like more to me that if you had, in the absence of any other information, you would go and say you can't disprove God, the Christian God. And then, so that was a very minimalist thing. But then he goes on to argue with actual claims of miracles. And I pointed out one thing that happened in his personal life. That's very hard to minimize. That's really hard to, I was just like trying to say what I was really trying to tell Matt. I said, what are you going to tell people that have experienced what Charles Duke did?
Let's talk about that, because there's actually an interesting framing of this issue, right, with respect to miracles. Okay, let's talk about a case where someone has not given much thought about God and whether he exists or not. It's just an average person, didn't really think about the deep metaphysical questions of life, the meaning of life. Does God exist? Really doesn't care. But then comes upon a ridiculous experience, a religious experience, as one might call. Right now, this individual is actually faced with two kinds of explanation. Right, it could be that he hallucinated, something happened to his brain, and he just had this ridiculous experience as a result. Now, on the other side of it, it could have been God trying to intervene in his life. Right now, here, I think this is how Pascal would say. Now, it's like you said, it is very difficult to interpret Pascal, so I'm afraid to characterize Pascal on the actual usage of his word miracle, but the point is that it still somewhat addresses this point where someone is faced. I had this ridiculous experience last night. I had if it felt like a lucid vision, think of that kind of thing, and I don't know what to make of it, right? So the point is that if the person that had that experience feels as though there's kind of equal probability with respect to an intentional divine explanation versus some other unknown naturalistic explanation, then the prudential reason might come in, right? Now, some people might just have that kind of experience and not be agnostic as to the explanation and immediately become a believer, right? But the point is that people wrestle with this idea that I had some really weird experience here, right? And I have equal reason to deny it and accept it as a divine intervention in my life, but I'm going to accept it given the utility that it brings to my life, right? It just seems like the world might make more sense. It will motivate me to do all the X, Y, and Z. It motivates me to stop doing A, B, and C, right? This kind of mentality kind of sets in. And the point is that now for those that don't know me, I'm not a Christian. Okay, I'm actually a pretty hard atheist with respect to Christianity, but that's not the point. The point is that I don't think someone is irrational for if they're in that kind of situation where there's equal weight on both sides as they perceive equal confidence, we might say, to accept belief in God on a prudential reason. I don't think that's irrational at all. I don't think they should revise their belief given what their background knowledge. Yes.
And it doesn't mean that you believe it. I'll just, if Matt wasn't so busy screaming at me and just talking to himself, he might have been able to hear what I had to say. I said, for me, this wager was, and I tried to articulate it. I said, I didn't completely believe, but I didn't completely disbelieve either. And I gave some of the reasons why. And I said, given that, and I tried to point out, even Richard Dawkins on his scale of, 1 to 7, where 7 is there's no God. He only rates himself at 6.9. 6.9. So I said, so there's a residual probability in his mind, especially if he's talking about the Christian God.
We do need to discuss.
It could be true. And I said, okay, so he put a figure to it. The point is, this is a non-zero probability. And, we could say, okay, point, I'm a little bit anal with numbers. Let me see what that would equate to. Equal 0.1 divided by 7. That's a 1.4% chance. Okay, so there's a 1.4% chance you could be in a car accident if you go out on an really icy night. Is it worth the risk just to go to a party? I mean, that's a decision there. And that was the point. It's not that you absolutely know you're going to be in an accident or not. It's, as you said, prudential. It is a prudent decision to at least consider and not dismiss. And so where I was, and Pascal said, seek then to convince yourself. Now, I didn't necessarily follow.
Let's talk about that because that's when Dillahunty made another really, really silly claim. With respect to self-deception. Okay, so look, he said that this is just all self-deception. Then, if you actually come to believe that God exists, well, remember Pascal. There's a contradiction with Dillahunty, right? Dillahunty himself said, well, Pascal doesn't think that you can know God, right? Which means that it's going to be something like this, right? Where if you don't already have the belief that God exists, right, and you wish to come to that belief because of a prudential reason, right? If you end up kind of facilitating that belief, right? So you go from a state of non-belief, you go to church, you pray, you go through the motion, so to speak, which is something that Pascal recommends, right? You go to Mass. I think he recommended Mass. That when you actually, if that's successful in terms of acquiring the belief, it would only be self-deception if you, during the process, already denied or rejected that God exists, right?
That's an interesting, I never thought of it that way. I never thought about it that way. And what I have said, and of course, he's more interested in giving his talking points than trying to understand anything. He's very shallow. To your knowledge, has he written any books of any depth?
No.
Yeah.
I and as an atheist, I will say that if Matt Dillahunty is your Superman atheist, I would recommend people like Alex Malpass, Graham Oppie, anyone but Dillahunty, right? But anyways, the point is this, right? It would only be self-deception if you initially rejected the existence of God, right? And if you want to believe in God, look, here's a good example. Let's say I want to learn calculus. I can't just snap my fingers and learn calculus right now. I don't know any calculus, right? And so, but if I took the steps, I opened a calculus book, I talked to people that knew calculus, I started going to classes, I did all these things and come to believe in all these new mathematical truths, right? I haven't self-deceived myself because I didn't start with the beliefs that there are no truths with respect to calculus, right?
Well, I have to say, I really appreciate, I mean, given that you said you're a hard atheist with respect to Christianity, that's why I valued you weighing in. And I know since you're a philosophy teacher, you'll use a little bit more, you'll be more verbose in terms of philosophy literature that's beyond what most people, but I valued what you just said. And as far as me, what I tried to tell, I didn't have it, he keeps cutting me off mid-sentence. It's like, okay, if that's the way you have to debate, that you can't actually let your opponent finish his sentences. I said, yeah, I know what the deal is. This isn't about trying to have real debate with this kind of,
yeah, it was
kind of those foul ways of trying to just do theater, and that's why I don't like
it. Was
difficult
difficult to listen to, and I mean, I talked to Dillahunty, and he did something similar to me, right? Yeah, but the point is, and I might have pretended to be a theist, but we won't tell anyone, okay? But the thing is that there's actually but there is one thing we might disagree about. And that's this notion of probability, right? There are basically, we distinguish in philosophy two kinds of probability at the least, right? There's this dichotomy of subjective probability and objective probability.
Yeah. If I could, I wanted to finish a thought, and then we'll go to the objective and subjective probability. What I wanted to say is, and he didn't give me a chance to complete my thought in my account. I was in that position that I just can't believe, and I can't force myself to believe. And I was at a Bible study at the time, and I just went to the Bible study, and I said, I don't have it in me to believe anymore. I can't force myself. I said, can you guys pray for me? They prayed for me for 2 years. Unfortunately, there was one young lady in the Bible study said, why don't you just believe? And I wanted to say, well, why don't I just believe I have billions of dollars in the bank? I shut my mouth. I didn't say that. But that's what I was thinking. I said, you just don't believe whatever you want. You need to have some evidence and reasons. And I'm glad those people prayed for me. So even though I didn't follow Pascal's exact prescription, it worked for me to keep going to church, to stay connected, and to ask people to pray for me. And that's from James 5:16, confess your faults before one another so that you may be healed. And this gives me a chance to announce, in light of yesterday's talk, and I've been considering this, I might write a 30-page booklet. It's not going to be long. It's 20 to 50 pages on wagering your soul. Because now that I had this debate, I kind of know Matt's playbook and the atheist playbook. It's pretty shallow, not very well thought out. So what ended up happening is I ended up studying evidence and reasons, and I got convinced that most of the atheist arguments were not evidence-based as they claimed. It was faith-based. And I tried, I opened with it, and of course, he was pretty smart to avoid talking about the actual things when I pointed out the origin of life and the origin of the universe. But particularly life, I said, isn't it outrageous that scientists are appealing to solve the origin of life problem by appealing to multiple universes that they can never see, never test, never verify, never know, and that's how they're going to solve it. I said, how is belief in a creator God that much more any more outrageous than that? And what is something like that being put in a scientific publication? He didn't want to deal with it. He just said it's irrelevant. And I said, okay, yeah, that's the way debate goes. And so I humored him. And he didn't offer me anything. And what I tried to point out for the Christians, I said, and I'm thankful he tried to the best of his ability to answer my question. What does atheism have to offer a Christian? And I still don't remember his answer. I just remembered it wasn't very appealing to me.
Yeah.
Go on, Danny.
Well, yeah, we in the end of the day, we do fundamentally disagree. So there are a lot of things that we could talk about. But in the context of the debate yesterday with respect to Pascal's wager, the thing we do want to distinguish something called subjective probability and objective probability. Now, I know very little about objective probability, but I employ subjective probability all the time, and everyone does, right? And the idea of subjective probability relies on this notion of prior probability, your priors, your background information, your previous experiences, right? So the idea is that when you're there are two kinds of word usages, or really two things that actually confuse a lot of the dialectic, and that's this notion of certainty and confidence and percentage with respect to subjective probability, right? So it's okay. I think there's a lot of utility in me saying I think there's a 60% chance, that it'll rain tomorrow, right? Without appealing to anything else, just because it's been raining every other day or something, I'm appealing to my background knowledge, right? The last, let's say 50% chance. I'm sorry. Let's say it rained 3 days in a row, 2 days. It stopped raining for 2 days, and then it rained another day. And I think, there's like a 60%. I think it just seems like it's going to rain tomorrow, given my priors, right? That kind of probability, I think, is a little bit different than whatever the weathermen are doing when they report that there's a 60% chance that it's going to rain, right? And
yes,
yeah. And so the point is that it's, I think, a matter of utility when we say I'm 0%, I'm 100% sure, I'm 50% sure, I'm 20% sure. The percentages are just tools of communication for others, right? About our confidence levels, right? And I think that what Pascal is talking about is just that, right? The idea is that I have a set of priors with respect to what I've learned and what I've experienced, and when we're talking about a particular proposition, I want to know whether it's true or false. I might appeal to those priors and come to realize that it's equally weighed, right? And that's like when I'm 50% sure, right? Now, this notion of certainty and confidence actually is not really an epistemic notion, okay? When we understand what knowledge is, no part of the formula doesn't include certainty, okay? So you can be very certain, 100%. I could say I'm 100% certain, right, that blah, 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 blah. Well, that still leaves the open question of whether I'm right or wrong, okay? So with typically how we characterize knowledge is that, yeah, you have to believe it has to be true, and there's a justification, right? And there's a lot of controversy about what justification means here. But the idea is that if it's the case that it's some we are saying that we're extremely certain about something, or uncertain about something, or very confident about something, or very not so confident about something, that doesn't factor into our knowledge about that thing, actually. So I think that really when we're talking about probability with respect to Pascal, since Pascal wants to iron out epistemic reasons, that those probabilities, I think, will be subjective and non-epistemic motivations, I suppose. And I'm sorry, I might have been a little long-winded there.
If I could, again, if Dillahunty doesn't, I thought he was just really shallow, and I do apologize for just feeling smug, because I just thought the guy's I'm just like, dude, you have no depth and you have no interest in learning, except just hearing yourself talk. And I just like, well, yeah, that's about where this debate's going, because he was screaming at, what's your evidence? What's your evidence? And why do you figure that? And he characterized this essay by Richard Conn Henry, who is the Henry Rollin professor, of physics and astronomy at the Henry Rollin School of Physics and Astronomy at Johns Hopkins University. Down the hallway from Richard Conhenry is Nobel Prize winner in physics, Adam Rice. And this was my alma mater. And so he was saying, just because a scientist in some lab coat gives an opinion doesn't mean that it's true. And I said, he said, do you give a probability? I said, well, in this case, he believes that he believes there is a God just based on quantum mechanics. I said, it just flew over his head. I'm just like, I see where this is going. So much what I'm putting on the table is just so over his head. He'll just say, oh, you didn't present any evidence. So let me read this if you'll indulge me.
Yeah.
This would have been valuable. It's a short essay. I'm not saying Richard Conhenry is right, but the fact that this appeared in the world's most prestigious scientific journal, that he was allowed to give this opinion essay, tells me and I've suspected that there are many physicists that are sympathetic to this view, at least open to it. So, July 6, 2005, the mental universe. Historically, we have looked to our religious leaders to understand the meaning of our lives, the nature of our world. With Galileo Galilei, this changed. In establishing that the earth goes around the sun, Galileo not only succeeded in believing the unbelievable himself, but also convinced almost everyone else to do the same. This was a stunning accomplishment in physics outreach, and with the subsequent work of Isaac Newton, physics joined religion in seeking to explain our place in the universe. The more recent physics revolution of the past 80 years has yet to transform general public understanding in a similar way. And yet, a correct understanding of physics was accessible even to Pythagoras. According to Pythagoras, number is all things, and numbers are mental, not mechanical. Likewise, Newton called light particles, knowing the concept to be an effective theory, useful, not true. As noted by Newton's biographer, Richard Westphal, the ultimate cause of atheism, Newton asserted, is this notion of bodies having, as it were, a complete and absolute independent reality in themselves. Newton knew of Newton's rings and was untroubled by what is shallowly called wave-particle duality. The 1925 discovery of quantum mechanics solved the problem of the universe's nature. Bright physicists were again led to believe the unbelievable, this time that the universe is mental. According to Sir James Jeans, the stream of knowledge is heading toward a non-mechanical reality. The universe begins to look more like a great thought than like a great machine. Mind no longer appears to be an accidental intruder into the realm of matter. We ought rather to hail it as the creator and governor of the realm of matter. But physicists have not yet followed Galileo's example and convinced everyone of the wonders of quantum mechanics. As Sir Arthur Eddington explained, it is difficult for the matter-of-fact physicist to accept the view that the substratum of everything is of mental character. In his play Copenhagen, which brings quantum mechanics to a wider audience, Michael Frayn gives these words to Niels Bohr. We discover the universe exists only through the understanding lodged inside the human head. Bohr's wife replies, this man you put at the center of the universe, is it you or is it Heisenberg? This is what sticks at the craw of Eddington's matter-of-fact physics. Discussing the play, John H. Marburger III, President George Bush's science advisor, observes, in the Copenhagen interpretation of microscopic nature, there are neither waves nor particles, but then frames his remarks in terms of the non-existent underlying stuff. He points out that it is not true that matter sometimes behaves like a wave and sometimes like a particle. The wave is not the underlying stuff. It is the spatial pattern of detector clicks. We cannot help but think of the clicks as caused by little localized pieces of stuff that we might call particles. This is where the particle language comes from. It does not come from the underlying stuff, but from our psychological predisposition to associate localized phenomenon with particles. In place of underlying stuff, there has been serious attempts to preserve the material world, but they produce no new physics and serve only to preserve an illusion. Scientists have sadly left it to non-physicist Frayne to note the emperor's lack of clothes. It seems to me that the view which Murray Gell-Mann favors, and which involves what he calls alternate histories or narratives, is precisely as anthropocentric as Bohr's, since histories and narratives are not freestanding elements of the universe, but human constructs, as subjective and restricted in their viewpoint as the act of observation. Physicists shy from the truth because the truth is so alien to everyday physics. A common way to avoid the mental universe is to invoke decoherence, the notion that the physical environment is sufficient to create reality independent of the human mind. Yet the idea that any irreversible act of amplification is necessary to collapse the wave function is known to be wrong. In Renninger-type experiments, the wave function is collapsed simply by your human mind seeing nothing. The universe is entirely mental. In the 10th century, Ibn al-Haytham initiated the view that light proceeds from a source, enters the eye, and is perceived. The picture is incorrect, but is still what most people think occurs, including, unless pressed, most physicists. To come to terms with the universe, we must abandon such views. The world is quantum mechanical. We must learn to perceive it as such. One benefit of switching humanity to a correct perception of the world is the resulting joy of discovering the mental nature of the universe. We have no idea what this mental nature implies, but the great thing is, it is true. Beyond the acquisition of this perception, physics can no longer help. You may descend into solipsism, expand to deism, or something else if you can justify it. Just don't ask physics for help. There is another benefit of seeing the world as quantum mechanical. Someone who has learned to accept that nothing exists but observations is far ahead of peers who stumble through physics hoping to find what things are. If we can pull a Galileo and get people believing the truth, they will find physics a breeze. The universe is immaterial, mental, and spiritual. Live and enjoy. And in his other writings, Richard Conhenry says he believes in some sort of God. He's deistic, so he's atheistic as far as Christianity, but he's deistic, and so I mean, if Matt wants to write this off, that's on him.
I do want to. No,
but the point is, to me, as a student of physics, this is a non-zero probability. We don't have any experiments that can absolutely confirm this, but Richard Conhenry is not the only physicist that just took the equations of quantum mechanics. There's Frank Tipler, there was F.J. Belafonte. They said, okay, let's just take the implications of our accepted laws of physics. And this is what they came up with. I said, to me, that gives me a non-zero probability. He said, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? Like, okay, he just dismissed this as some guy's opinion in a lab coat. And I'm like, no, that's not.
With respect to the article that you just read, that there seems to be two views that author is endorsing that are actually seriously considered in philosophy of science and in metaphysics. The first one that's just glaringly obvious is that the writer of this article is what we call a scientific anti-realist. Okay, so if you want to, scientific anti-realism basically denies the reality of this kind of fundamentalness to the universe, right? I guess think of like fundamental wave or particle, that these unobservables, there's no realness to them. Okay, so now about, I think, 15 to 30% of philosophers of science are scientific anti-realist. So that would put about 70% of philosophers of science and the realism category. But there's almost a third of philosophers of science, that's to say people that study what science is, right, endorse this kind of view. The second kind of view that it seems to obviously endorse is a view called idealism. Okay, now there are lots of forms of idealism. I think it started to begin. One of the most famous kind of forwarders of what did I just call this? Idealism is a guy named Berkeley. I forgot his first name. Now, Berkeley was a theist, and he didn't really posit these kind of entities out in the external world that were in the end responsible for our observations, and basically equated existence to perception, right? Now he did accept a kind of bird's eye view of the world and just thought that the bird was God, right? That there was a fact of the matter of how things are, namely God is sustaining these kinds of facts, but ultimately the things that are, the things that are that is, these are exist in virtue of some kind of perceptive thing going on, right? So now Kant comes in and kind of establishes problems with this view, but kind of takes another version of idealism called transcendental idealism, and then makes a delineation between the noumena and the phenomenal world, the noumenal world and the phenomenal world, right? And basically says something like, look, all of these qualities, this length, width, the color, how our experience, these are all phenomenal. They're all internal to the mind, and there's something out there that we really can't talk about, the world as it is itself, that might explain why the phenomenal world, but we really can't talk about that. We can only really talk about our internal states, the kind of mental qualities, right? The qualities of length, width, depth, color, extension, all this stuff. That's all mental. So that reminds me of idealism, right? So yeah, it seems like he wants to push a kind of scientific anti-realist position, and along with like an idealist, like that the world is immaterial at the end of it.
And my point was, and this is my view, these questions cannot be resolved by experiment and observation. I really think there's some questions that are permanently beyond us. And
yes.
Now looking back at the debate, I should have been calling out Matt. I said, okay, I respect your, I could see that that's your faith position. That would have probably really gotten under his skin, because I would say, how do you know that your methodology is right? You're assuming you're right. That's a faith position. And, if I had the second, boy, that would really set him off, which I doubt that I'd ever talk to him again. But if I meet another Matt Dillahunty type,
I remember us talking maybe a week and a half before the debate in an open mic room, right? Where you and I actually agreed that Matt Dillahunty wouldn't demonstrate that kind of behavior, right? I didn't think he would do it. I thought he would only do that to his callers, right? Because there was a video of me, I called in, he really mistreated me. And,
I saw it.
Yeah. And then you and I agreed, well, he probably won't do that in this more formal setting. And look, and he's just very irritable for some reason, right?
Well, and I do apologize. I did look kind of smug, because when he started to fly off the handle, I said, that tells me, I was starting to just almost laugh. There was a smirk on my face, and I admit it. It's because, the way that was a tell. I said, the way he was behaving tells me he's run out of ammunition. He's not,
Sal, I would have done much worse. So I would have started. I'm actually, when I look at Matt as a very pretentious person, and I know some people don't think that, but that's one of my buttons, right? I end up becoming a little abusive and antagonistic to people like that, because I think it's justice. I know, but the point is that he's an infuriating interlocutor, right? He's not. He's like coming in there thinking that he knows what Pascal's wager and what the essence of Pascal's wagers are about, but then at the same time demanding evidence and epistemic reasons for belief when that's not the subject, right?
And I thought I provided epistemic reasons with those. If he was totally, like I said, that this is me being a nice guy. I could have said, just because you don't understand it and it flew over your head doesn't mean it wasn't good evidence.
Yeah, I would have just said, how is this relevant? You don't understand. Pascal is talking about prudential reasons, about what if you believe in God, is your life better for it, right? And consider the infinite potential consequence, right? And of course, for a person that thinks that there's an equal kind of prior probability, right? But yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to share just I mean, because this is like kind of like a second after show about the debate, because this is the material that I want people to know about. So I quoted one physicist, another respected physicist. He was mentioned in my class on, I believe, either cosmology or general relativity, Frank Tipler. He said, now this is kind of interesting, said a recent poll of National Academy of Sciences published in Scientific American indicated that more than 90% are atheists. These men and women have built their entire worldviews on atheism. They would be exceedingly reluctant to admit that any result of science could be valid if it even suggested God could exist. I discovered this the hard way when I published my book, The Physics of Immortality. The entire book is devoted to describing what the known laws of physics predict the far future of the universe will be like. Not once in the entire book did I use anything but known physical laws, the laws of physics that are in all textbook, and which agree with all experiments conducted to date. Unfortunately, in the book, I gave reasons for believing that the final state of the universe, a state outside of space and time and not material, should be identified with a Judeo-Christian God. It would take a whole book to explain why. My scientific colleagues, atheists to a man, were outraged, even though the theory of the final state of the universe involved only known physics. My fellow physicists refused to even discuss the theory. If the known laws of physics imply that God exists, then in their opinion, this can only mean that the law of physics have to be wrong. This past September, at a conference held at Windsor Castle, I asked the well-known cosmologist Paul Davies what he thought of my theory. He replied that he could find nothing wrong with it mathematically, but he asked what justified my assumption that the known laws of physics were correct. At the same conference, the famous physicist Freeman Dyson refused to discuss my theory, period. I would not encounter such refusals if I had not chosen to point out my theory's theological implications. As a physicist, I am aware that quantum mechanics, the central theory of modern physics, is even more deterministic than was the classical mechanics of which Darwin was aware. More than this, quantum mechanics is actually teleological. The physicists don't use this loaded word. We call it unitarity instead of teleology. That is, quantum mechanics says that it is completely correct to say that the universe's evolution is determined not by how it started in the Big Bang, but by the final state of the universe. Every stage of universal history, including every stage of biological and human history, is determined by the ultimate goal of the universe. And if I'm correct that the universal final state is indeed God, then every stage of universal history, in particular every mutation that has ever occurred or will ever occur in any living being, is determined by the action of God. Now, I don't agree with everything that Tipler pointed out, but this was reflected when what we see in the present day, people are appealing to multiple universes that we can't see, observe, verify, or ever know. And I said, yeah, because it's posing all these problems and they're concocting these theories. By the way, multiverses are not an argument against God, because there could still be a God that's ruler over the multiverses.
You'd be very fascinated by this logical fallacy, and I don't think all of them are making this, but have you heard of the gambler's fallacy?
I may have. Go ahead.
It's something like, okay, so this is there's two fallacies here, but we have to understand the gambler's fallacy to understand this other fallacy, right? So let's say you roll a die and you get 6 10 times in a row, and then you make the inference, right, that you'll roll a 6 on the 11th cast of the die, right? That's a gambler's fallacy, right? Just because there's like a consistent outcome with respect to some kind of unpredictable event or random event doesn't mean that it'll continue to be consistent, right? Now, so that's basically it, right? In a nutshell. Now, there's another fallacy called the reverse gambler's fallacy. Okay, and you're a gambler, right? So I don't know a lot about cards, but are there certain hands in whatever kind of card game that are very statistically unlikely to hold or to have?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
imagine you walk in the casino and you see someone holding this hand, this very statistically unlikely hand. If you were to infer, right, that he must have been here for hours, or he must have um, gone through a myriad of hands prior to this one, because that is statistically unlikely, that is called the reverse gambler's fallacy, right? So I don't think all of them commit this fallacy, but if what they're doing is something like this, get the if they establish a very low objective probability of the way things are in this universe, right, and then make an inference that therefore there must have been multiple universes, right, to explain that into statistical improbability, right, that's actually a fallacy. Does that make sense?
Yes, and they'll couch it in, they'll give some reasonable justifications, not totally outrageous. I am familiar with kind of some of the physics involved. There are actually multiple universe. There are a variety of multiple worlds, the many worlds of quantum mechanics, and then the many worlds in one of eternal inflation. There's so many, and these can be postulated without using the gambler's fallacy.
Well,
So
the point of the
I'm not.
fallacy is that it's of necessity, right? So if they're saying that necessarily because of you had this hand, then you must have had a great number of hands prior to. That's where the fallacy lies, right? If they're just saying something like "I can't help but believe," or considering this like statistical model, we might say that there are multiple hands prior to this one. That's different, right? Most fallacies have to do with issues of meaning or what follows, right?
Uh, I wanted to quote one more physicist, and I mentioned that I was taking a statistical mechanics and thermodynamics class. This was the book by Pathery and Beale. So this is a physics textbook. In that textbook, they referenced this book. Let me see if I have it. They referenced this. No, they referenced this physicist, F.J. Belinfante. And I knew that if a book is well regarded as my physics book, and you could tell these were just absolutely brilliant people, and they would point to Belinfante, then I knew Belinfante's a serious physicist. He wrote the book Measurements in Time Reversal and Objective Quantum Theory. And what did he have to say? Let me see. We thus see how quantum theory requires the existence of God. We thus see how quantum theory requires the existence of God. So Matt was saying, how do you calculate the probability? I said, well, if you accept quantum mechanics, one reasonable interpretation is that it requires the existence of God. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the Christian God, but I said that's a start. So it's like, okay, I tried my best to point out that you can't just say that the probability is zero. I mean, some authors who are just not deriving from any from any theological or sacred text, derive it from the laws of physics. But, that just floats over Dillahunty's head. So, I mean, what can I say?
Well, the point is that whether you agree or disagree with that claim, there needs to be a lot of careful thinking and not the shotgun kind of like knee-jerk response is usually not what these sorts of things deserve, right? Now, I mean, it's funny because a lot of these debates are actually a pretty horrible platform for coming to like learning something. It's most of these debates I like for the dramatic aspects. It's like watching a reality TV show.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are a few debates or interactions or people that I particularly lend an ear to, and I learn a lot. So if this is tautological, but if done well, you'll learn a lot, right? A lot of the debates are people are not so much interested. But I know that even me, right? Like if I were to debate Dillahunty, I would have a bias, and I would have a bias with respect to trying to humiliate him. But I mean, that's why I don't really pursue it, right? But
Well, no, I didn't have any other point. I just wanted to get that off. Some things that I'm discussing here that would have been good material to have an actual discussion, which debates aren't. They're just theater.
yeah,
I had no idea how many viewers, how many new subscribers this debate would be helping me get. Maybe it's going to just help the search engines. It's kind of a necessary nuisance to sometimes deal with.
Yeah, I see.
And so,
but you have a lot of Dillahunty's minions coming to watch the debate. Yeah, so that
So I want to acknowledge just to administrate. Otangela said, "Why don't you open up the stream for others to come in?" I think I prefer having just very focused discussions, and I did promise Danny that I would give him a platform today, and so we can have. So I mean,
well, it has been an hour. It has been an hour. So I just wanted to correct I wanted everyone to get a good understanding of what Pascal was after. I wanted to correct Dillahunty's two very misleading points about self-deception and saying that Pascal thought that God was unknowable, and the third thing, coming from an atheist, if you accept your religion or your belief in God on pragmatic reasons because you're overwhelmed by the evidence, or you don't have the time to go through all the philosophical argumentations, that is not irrational. Yeah. That is not irrational, guys, right?
Yeah, and thank you. Now you did mention about God being unknowable. What is Pascal's view? And I apologize. It is kind of hard to read what he's writing.
Yeah. So what he means by this is that there's no. Remember, if we understand knowledge in terms of a good reason plus, or really justification, true, and belief, right? That's the formula for knowledge. Pascal thought that the proofs for God at the time, right? Remember, this is 1600s, okay? So all we have is Aquinas' 5 ways. We have Anselm's arguments, maybe some others I can't name off the top of my head. And he didn't think they were very convincing, right? And so that's to say he wasn't motivated by natural theology, right? In terms of his belief in Christianity, right? And he didn't think that there was any good reason to accept the negation, right? That Christianity is false, right? So what that means is that if Pascal thought that there was not a contrastive reason for accepting one over the other, then you can't know either. That's what he means by unknowable, right? So he's just not convinced by natural theology, is what it's being said. I think he was a little persuaded by some of the based on what I've read, and I could be wrong about this. So if someone knows more about Pascal and whoever's listening to the video, it seems like he somewhat agrees with critics of miracles, because he seems to think that empirical observation / how your experiences are consistent with a number of explanations, and that God, believing that God or an intentional explanation for that experience or that religion, that's a viable belief in virtue of the prudential reasons or something like that. I think that's how I would understand Pascal, but I'm not too sure on that last point, right? The point is that if you witness Jesus resurrect, that's consistent with God resurrecting him. It's also consistent with some weird law of biology that we have no knowledge about, right? And so I think that's the point with respect to what he thinks about miracles, but I am not sure.
And I'm opening up the stream, if that's okay with you, Danny, and maybe we can have a philosophical lesson for me sometime. I would be very honored. I want to point out one thing. In the Pascal referred to Augustine and saying there'd be no Christian faith without miracles. And so I looked this up, and I actually was very fascinated. So this is from Augustine's The City of God, chapter 8. Of miracles which were wrought that the world might believe in Christ, and which have not ceased since the world believed. And this is very interesting because, again, that case of Charles Duke, even though it's extremely rare, and in the age of science, there's been less and less of these miracles. But then, you have something like that. And then I know people like James Tour said he had a visitation from Jesus. And he's like one of the top scientists in the world. You just have these things. And but it seems that they occur like in very oppressed lands, like in China and India, and where people are very destitute. And it has an effect on people. So,
well, I had one. I and it haunts me to this day. But it's funny because when I told my Christian friends that I had one, of course they're telling me to affirm, my belief in God, and then when I tell my atheist friends, they're like, well, why isn't it just not a product of your anxiety, right? So and I really, it really it does. I have to say that it scares me, right? That I had one. I wish I didn't, right? That way I didn't have to really deal with it.
I know what you mean. I talked about it myself last night. I know what you mean at some level. I mean, that scared me too when I had a vision. I'm just like, I didn't ask for this. Some people get themselves in an emotional state and they can imagine that was not the case. This was just kind of just going routine. I wasn't in a particularly emotional state or anything. That's why it was really disturbing. But go on. I interrupted you, Danny.
Yeah. The point is that if, let's say there was a world in which I took that as a sufficient explanation, right? That sufficiently explained my belief in God, I don't think that commits me to me being irrational, right? Because there's this idea that, and this is why I really like Plantinga, that like you must have justification for your beliefs, right? I think this is a lie, right? And then there's this kind of, so there's certain things that we believe that we would say we're unjustified, but we feel like it's within we have a right to believe it. Now I don't hold to this, but you would very well benefit from this view called phenomenal conservatism. I would look it up, right? Because I'm not going to define it. Christians really like this view called phenomenal conservatism. And the idea is that there might be a case in which you're not justified in holding to a belief, but you have a right to believe it nonetheless. So they distinguish justification and a right to believe. Okay? Go ahead.
You said you were scared by your miracle?
Yeah, I had an experience. Yeah. I had an experience. It's hard to describe, of course, and by definition, indescribable.
I understand. So, maybe that's all, because it's a personal thing, and I'm not going to dig, but yeah, it's. I understand. So I'm opening it up. Apologies for holding you off, Otangelo, because I promised Danny this, but I'm presuming it's okay with you, Danny. I opened up.
Of course, yeah. I'm all about this. I need to go to the bathroom, so this is perfect.
Okay, so welcome, Otangelo, and thank you for your support last night. The modern day debate was basically a huge swamp, and after all that, we only got 15 more subscribers on my channel, so that's okay. I'm not, I'm really not into trying to get into high drama. And so what's on your mind, dear friend?
Well, I think that your introduction was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Now, this is
your microphone has a lot of buzz. I can barely hear you, Otangelo.
Oh, just a moment. Just a moment.
How's my mic? Can you hear me?
Sorry, I'm back. Okay.
How's mine? Sal, you're on mute.
Oh, Martin, is that you?
Yeah.
Is it better now?
Is my mic okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Little
Is it better
Tango.
now? Is it better now?
Slightly better. Okay, gentlemen, you go on ahead. Oh, someone said he's in a helicopter. Is that Otangelo? Brandon said, is he in a helicopter?
What about now?
I can hear you, barely.
Well, let's check here because I don't know why it's not the same.
Martine, what's on your mind? Thank you for joining.
No, I just want to say you did really good. I would have lost it, like when, when I saw him being so rude with you and everything. I almost lost it here watching the debate.
Hello. Better
You,
now?
you did really good and staying cool, and you gave good arguments, but he was interrupting you the whole time, and there's so many good arguments. So I don't know how he thinks there's no evidence for creator. There's like massive amounts of evidence. Like even in our, you can help me if I'm wrong about this, but even at the basis of life, there's a programming code, and there's a programming code that nanomolecular machines read and carry out the commands at the base of life. Am I doing this right, or is that wrong?
Yes. Well, it's not just that. It exceeds anything that we can actually do. And if we could actually duplicate that, we would have cured all diseases by now. That's how complex this is. So people are confronted with, where did this technology that is so much better than, orders of magnitude beyond anything collectively all our scientists and engineers put together could build.
Yeah.
And it's in stuff like a blade of grass, which people just walk on. So there's a saying that the cornerstone that the builders rejected and ended up being the chief cornerstone, and that theme is repeated. The very thing that you kind of just dismiss and not even think about is sometimes a very powerful, and this is a very powerful evidence. And so that wasn't discussed at all last night. He was just dismissing it.
How does someone not see this is evidence? Like this is like obviously evidence, and scientists are just discovering more of programming code. Even at the base of the universe, they're discovering programming code.
Well, I'll tell you privately that people privately are confiding it in scientific circles. They just don't come out. The reason I know that is I talk to them, and sometimes they're a little bit bold, even my classmates, because one time I was just simply describing the magnetic compass in a bird. It exceeds anything we can build. Professional chemists have studied this, and they're like, we can't build molecules that do quantum mechanics, this spin chemistry. It puts it in a quantum state that we can't duplicate, and it's so much better than anything we can build. As I was describing this in my cell biology class during a class presentation that all students had to give, my topic was on magnetic sensing. One of the students right in front of our professor, who's also the dean of the college, said, it's really hard to believe this could evolve. And I was just floored. I said, that's so bold, but I know if someone says that and is so open about it, that other people are thinking the same thing. And then privately, some of my classmates conceded it. And where I took my classes at the NIH, and I knew a lot of the NIH, not a lot. I knew a few NIH researchers. They said, oh yeah, they accept it. They don't talk about it. But one reason I asked Matt Dillahunty, and again, he just cuts me off and tries to just bull me over.
Yep.
And I asked him, I said, okay, what if you're the blind beggar in John chapter 9? What would you do? And the best way that to the best of my recollection, because he was just kind of screaming out his answers, it's kind of hard to hear what he actually said. I got the impression he was just trying to deny that. He's trying to say that how can I know, or why is it rational to believe? That's the impression I got.
That was so silly what he said, Saul. I was thinking about his answer today, and it is so...
I don't mean to interrupt. I have to go, Sal. Thanks for having me on.
Danny, thank you. Thank you for your time, Danny, and I hope we'll do this again.
Yes, for sure. I really do respect you, Sal. Okay?
Likewise.
Okay, bye.
Hello.
Hello, Doctor. Hello, Will. Tangelo, can you continue?
Yeah, I think that your introduction was great, Sal, and you are, of course, intellectually at a completely other level than Matt. So I mean, he doesn't know absolutely nothing about science, about biology,
nothing.
So he was interrupting you constantly. And I think if I were you, I would not apologize all the time as you did yesterday, because who was actually abusing the conversation was him. You did not have the chance even to finish one thought of yours.
Oh yeah.
And basically, he interrupted you in anything, and he cannot control himself. And that makes every dialogue with him really obnoxious and not pleasure. It's not a pleasure to listen to a dialogue when he has a conversation with someone, because he has absolutely no respect to actually listen what the other side has to say, to digest it and give a thoughtful answer to that. He is not learning. He is there to spew the nonsense, the bullshit, his incredulity, and that's it. And he's for 15 years.
Well, I chose to try to be as polite as possible just so people could see the contrast and they could see who's losing the argument. Anyone who's really sensitive could see he was running out of ammunition. That's what you do when you don't have real arguments.
That's
and the
why
arguments
he
I
got
put on the
triggered.
table flew over his head. I'm just like, what am I going to do? Because I don't want to be. I don't want to. I could have been really arrogant. And I said, just because you don't understand it doesn't mean this isn't good evidence.
But Sal, you know what I do with people like him who have no understanding of science? I use analogies, because analogies, they are on the level of their understanding. And you see, this guy is so silly that in one of my calls, I said to him, something cannot come from nothing.
Yeah.
And he denied it and said, you have to demonstrate that something cannot come from nothing. And I said, no, I don't. And he did hang up on me. So he is completely screwed in his mind.
And he was saying I didn't know what I was talking about. I wanted to say, hey, dude, how many degrees do you have? He has none. All right. But I wasn't going to pull rank. I wasn't, I said, because I respect people that, it's really the arguments. But when he started saying I don't know stuff, that kind of got a little under my skin. But then he said, I made a living with poker and craps. I couldn't help myself. I laughed. I said, I got this guy. That's so stupid. I understand the math. I understand a lot of the math of gambling. I got kicked out of the casinos because I understand it. I said, you say something like that. I couldn't help myself. I said, yeah, I'm owning this guy now.
You were owing him also when he was saying that we can't know anything for sure. And I saw how you tried to turn that against him. And it was really clever, because he was just playing in order to keep his skepticism. And of course, there is nothing that can convince him. But when you throw that to him, he gets angry and says, oh, you don't know me. And he tries to deny it. But you cannot convince him with absolutely nothing, because he is close-minded.
He doesn't want God to exist.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Are you also Baptist, Chad, or are you someone else?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, I'm Baptist, Chad, but I've watched that debate and I got so mad at Matt when he was speaking and he says, hey, do not overtalk me. I was like, Matt.
That's what he does all the time.
You always speak against Saul, when he was giving an example, and you're telling him to not overtalk you when you have been overtalking him for 40 minutes. I was like,
Yeah. Well, you know what? See, I'm gonna because James gave me permission to rebroadcast this, and I'll rebroadcast it on the channel. We can have our own side chat and discussion when we do that. And I could point out, I said, I'm going to hold this up of a trophy. And people are just like, you took a beating. I said, screaming at someone is not giving me a beating. That indicates he's running out of arguments. And I want people to see that. The Christians saw it. The Christians saw that he was running out of it. And I called him on it, and he's trying to act so reasonable. I said, you're the blind beggar in John 9. And he was just like, well, no, that's just he said, there's no proof of that. I said, that's not the point. Yeah. I want you to show the world. I just want to show that there's no level of evidence that would really convince you. He got
Yeah,
really
exactly.
mad.
Yeah.
Well,
But you
he
know
flipped.
that
He-
happened
He
also.
totally flipped when I pointed that out. And, so I backed down. I said, I didn't mean to say there's no evidence, but I said, in the eyes of a lot of Christians, that's just plain stupid.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You have no prospects. You're a blind beggar, and it's really sad to see homeless people. Okay, this guy wasn't totally homeless, but his parents would take him out, presumably, to go out there on the street and beg for his food. Because when the mom and dad die and the families are gone, he's going to have to fend for himself. That's all he can do. That's all the prospects you have. And then someone comes, opens your eyes. And the Pharisees asked him, well, what happened? He said, one thing I know, I was blind, but now I see. And then Jesus tells him, I'm the Messiah. What are you going to do? And Matt's going to say, well, how do I know that this is really Jesus? I'm just like, okay, that's how you're going to respond. Do you know how stupid that looks?
Yeah. And in the debate with Licona asked him, if someone chops up your head and then this guy puts his head on his body again and is healed, what does that mean? Is that a miracle or not? And he said, oh, I don't know. That doesn't mean that God did a miracle or something like that.
Exactly, nothing would convince him.
So that's just ridiculous and stupid,
Yeah,
stupid.
I think you know how I see Matt Dillahunty? I see him as in John 5, you see people see the miracle of God and they're like, oh, we want to follow you, we'll follow you to everywhere. And after, when they heard something that Jesus said that they don't like about, they just leave. And that's the same thing for Matt. Even if he were to see a miracle, he wouldn't believe. He would just say, well, it's alien.
But what his ultimate resort is ignorance. Basically, he boils down to say, oh, I don't know. I don't know what is true. I don't know if materialism is true. I don't know if theism is true. I simply have no position. I am just skeptic of everything. What is the consequence of this? When you confess it, then you confess that you have nothing to offer to anyone besides of ignorance. So what is the purpose of 15 years of doing these shows? Just to confess your ignorance?
Yep, exactly. And I said, so what's the expected value? He said, what do you have to offer a Christian by your atheism?
Nothing.
I don't remember the answer, but it's like, no, you don't have anything to offer me because, if Jesus the Messiah had worked a miracle in my life, and I believe he has both in my life and so many other people's, and S.J. Tomlinson actually kind of forced me to talk about something kind of personal when I talked about having the people come in this very room when my mother was dying. And we prayed for her. I said, what's the harm? He had at least enough class not to talk about it, and I respect him for that. But on the other hand, it's like, well, what do you have? In a way, it was good he kind of shut up because it's like, well, what was the harm?
Now, listen,
it may have been that God heard our prayer and helped us along. What is the harm? Why do you have to be 100% sure? And what I wanted to say is, you have a faith belief in evolution, right? I mean, you're just taking it on people's faith that it's correct, or abiogenesis. I said, you have faith beliefs in that. And when if Jesus worked a miracle in your life, you're going to suddenly be skeptical. I said, this is really kind of funny. You'll just buy into what other people say so quickly. You will not hear really reasoned arguments that are purely scientific, like what Michael Behe or Changed Hand. And I even gave the books. I said, there it is. And you're just going to dismiss that. But when a miracle happens in your life, it's like, suddenly it's like, I don't know if this is real or whatever. I'm just like, okay, if he had shut up and let me talk, he would have taken a hammering. And I said, yeah, he knows. The only way he's going to win this is to just interrupt and not let the discussion go on.
Yeah.
And, they could say, well, he won the debate. And I'm just like, okay, I'm not in it for that. I was in it because I said, well, I wanted to do a favor to my good friend James, and because he wanted an opponent, and so even though I was just laughing. I said, all the atheists thought this is great. I said, you guys ought to be embarrassed because he performed terribly, and he showed it with all his tantrums. Because if you're winning an argument, you stay cool because you have the odds in your favor.
Exactly.
And he was just acting like someone he didn't like. He's getting frustrated that he was getting beaten. And what could he do except interrupt me? because he didn't have good arguments. Because the two arguments I had, I said, what does atheism have to offer me? And what about what would you do if Jesus did a miracle for you? And I said, yeah, you've just signaled to everyone you're closed-minded. I'm going to take a break, and I'll let Will, Martine, and Angelo handle the talk for a little bit, but I'm going to share something. Let me share my screen, and then I'll let you gentlemen continue for a while, and I appreciate you joining. There is this, let me advertise one of my favorite blogs, Shadow to Light, that has Mike Jean in it. And he notes something. Modern atheism is built on a simple claim. There is no evidence that God exists. But how does the atheist know this? It's one thing to claim, I don't see any evidence for God. Or what you consider evidence for God is not what I consider evidence for God. But to proclaim there is no evidence for God is to make a truth claim about all objective reality, which wherever you look, whoever you are, however hard you look, you will not find any evidence of God, because there is no evidence to be found. And that's supposed to be true for all of us. Yet this is nothing more than empty posturing. We've seen how easy it is to completely neuter this claim. Simply ask the atheist what would count as evidence for God. After all, when the atheists insist there is no evidence for God, this question is a perfectly legitimate way to get the atheist to clarify what he is saying. And what have we found? First, many atheists will point to some miraculous event, perhaps writing in the stars. In other words, some event that could not possibly be explained by natural causes, something that would present itself as a gap in our current understanding by natural causes. But if that is the case, those events could only be evidence if we agreed that the God of the gaps approach is a valid and legitimate way of determining whether God exists. If we are to count a gap as evidence, we necessarily assume the validity of the God of the gaps logic. Yet atheists everywhere have insisted that the God of the gaps approach is not a valid approach. Thus, all these examples of miracles that would supposedly count as evidence for God truly would not count as evidence for God as far as the atheist is concerned. The atheist is engaged in deceptive hand-waving. The honest approach is for the atheist to admit that nothing would count as evidence for the existence of God. But then the atheist is simply admitting his or her closed mind, and the pronouncement that there is no evidence from God becomes vacuous. If nothing can count as evidence for the existence of God, then of course atheist is going to believe there's no evidence for God. Of course, not wanting to be seen as closed-minded dogmatists, some atheists have been looking for an escape hatch. Atheist activist Matt Dillahunty offers one such attempt that I have seen elsewhere. Since he takes over 27 minutes to make a 2-minute point, I'll focus on 26:16 in the video. But anyway, I'll skip that. I'm going to post the link to this article in Shadow to Light. And
yeah, it's either you accept everything as evidence for God or nothing will be evidence
for God. Specifically, what would change my mind? Okay, this is Dillahunty, quoting Dillahunty. What would change my mind? Evidence and argument, which I did provide last night, by the way. I can't give you specifics. But if there is a God, that God should know how exactly what would change my mind.
That's always his reply. Always. He says, I don't know, but God knows. So he is guilty. See, he's guilty if I'm not believing, because he isn't giving me the evidence that he knows would convince me. So it's like God need. It's like that's the problem I have with those atheists. They make that like God owned them something. God doesn't own you to reveal himself. He already had by special and natural revelation, but you don't want to accept them. They don't want to admit it. They simply doesn't want God to exist. That's the end of the story.
If I could finish this, and I'll let you gentlemen continue.
Yeah, sure.
I'll take a 10-minute break. It said, but if there is a God, that God should know exactly what would change my mind, should be capable of doing so, and hasn't, which means either God doesn't exist or doesn't want me to know he exists. Yet either way, it's not my problem. So Mike Jean, who wrote this, he said, so he comments, first, don't lose sight that Dillahunty is addressing a similar yet different point. For what would change my mind is not the same thing as what would count as evidence. In the future, we need to explore the variants of this question, but for now, let's deal with it the way Dillahunty frames it. So what was happening last night is Matt was basically saying there's no evidence, when what he's really saying is nothing, what I provided doesn't change his mind. That's not the same thing. And okay, so it says here, okay, so Dillahunty can't think of anything that would change his mind about God's existence. Sounds like a closed-minded atheist, and I called him out on it last night.
Yeah, you did well.
But then he punts and tries to make his inability to contemplate what it would take for him to admit being wrong into some type of argument against the existence of God. In essence, God being omniscient would know what would change Matt Dillahunty's mind. God being omnipotent would be able to do this. Matt still being an atheist means that such an omniscient and omnipotent God doesn't exist. There are lots of ways to deal with this, but I'll make it simple and quickly neutralize the escape hatch argument by cutting away at the premise. But if there is a God, that God should know exactly what would change my mind and replace it with one that is just as plausible. But if there is a God, that God should know that nothing would change my mind, would change Matt Dillahunty's mind. And since nothing would change Matt's mind, why bother? So I'll just leave it for you gentlemen to ponder. And thanks, guys, for bailing me out here. I'm just going to have to take a little commercial break. And,
Okay, enjoy.
I'd like to express gratitude for all the viewers that have joined in this discussion, even those with opposing viewpoints. Greetings to Christian Northam, Top Dog. Hate nothing. What's the takeaway? And I'm sorry if I missed some names, but greetings. So, gentlemen, I'll see you in a little bit.
Okay, awesome. Okay, what do you guys want to talk about? I still want to
So,
debate
Martin,
Sal one day.
So
I want to
Martin, you
debate
wrote-
Sal. I want to debate him on who has better evidence, him or me, for God. I
You
think
wanna
I
debate
have
me?
better.
you brought something up about
Huh?
information in astronomy, something like that. Can you elucidate
Yeah,
that?
scientists are beginning to discover even programming code at the base of the universe and not just at the base of life.
Do you
And
have
I can
any
send you a video.
science? Do you have
Huh?
a science paper or something like that on this?
No, there was a scientific discussion where a lot of high-ranking scientists were discussing this finding, that they're finding programming code at the base of the universe as well, and not just at the base of biology. And
Okay,
all
do
of
you have
that
a link?
points to intelligence. Huh?
Do you have a link?
Okay, I can send you a link. Where should I send it?
Ah.
But what's also cool is in the programming code at the base of life, the DNA code, scientists found like design strategies that we use in our computers, like automatic error correction, files within folders, and data encryption, and all that even further points to intelligence.
Yeah,
Of
that's
course,
very
it points to
fascinating.
intelligence, but they're just gonna say it could happen by. Okay, this is the
We've
atheist
never seen it.
mentality.
We've never seen such things come into
This is
existence without an initial input from intelligence. So
This is the atheist mentality. You have one chance out of 1 billion of trillion. Well, there's still one chance, so it could happen. That's just their mentality. That's how stupid most of them are.
yeah, I think the real problem they have is they have a huge bias against a creator. So
It's
any
their
evidence
sin.
that you give them, any evidence, they will just explain it away. Like the people in the Bible, they saw all Jesus' miracles, and how did they explain it away? They just said he did it through demons, and so they didn't accept him. They just tried explaining all his miracles away.
It's either you accept that God. This is how atheists in Christian work. Either you accept that God is all facts, that everything is related to God. So if I drink water right now, if I eat, this is evidence for God because I know this to be true. God has revealed it to me, and it's either you accept all those evidence for God, and you'll come to the conclusion God exists, or if you don't accept any evidence for the existence of God, then nothing will convince you. because you'll just if I present to you, like, let's say an atheist, the beginning of the universe, right? They'll just say, well, I don't think it's enough of a good evidence for me, so I'm just going to reject it. So atheists do.
I like talking to atheists because I love hearing the excuses they run to in order to try and explain away the evidence. Like, they would run to any kind of excuse.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's quite funny sometimes.
that's
Any
what
kind
God.
of excuse.
That's what God says, right? He uses foolishness, the foolish thing, like stuff that are so foolish to convince the wise. And that's what he speaks about in. If you read John 5, like, God did so many miracles, and he says, "Yet you do not seek me of the miracle, but because you were filled," right? So they've seen a miracle. Who could see miracle honestly as us Christian, right? If we see miracle, we wouldn't be surprised because God can do whatever He wants. It would just strengthen us in our faith, right?
Mm.
So those people here are Jew. They literally saw a miracle of God. God raising people, God, creating bread, God, giving vision to blind people, and they see Him. And after a bit, like, if you look a bit later, like 2 chapters later, God is preaching, Jesus is preaching about, that He's preaching about salvation, everlasting meat, that He is the meat from heaven, that, all that the Father gave Him will come to Him. And they don't like what He's saying, right? They don't like what He's saying. So what are they doing? They're all leaving Him. That's the same thing as atheists. Atheists don't like the idea that God can do what they want. They cannot do what they want because they have a God. So that's why they reject Him. Same as the Pharisee. They rejected Him because He was saying them that they're not good. That's their pridefulness coming over there.
I don't know how to say your name. Otengrelo. I don't know how to say your name, but where should I put the link?
You
It's
can
a
put
short
it here in
link
the private chat if you want.
in the
or
private chat.
public one, yeah.
Or I'll put it so everyone can see it.
No, it won't work. If you're not a moderator, it won't. Are you a
Oh, okay.
moderator?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it
It's
won't.
often required to be moderator to put it in the
Let's
public
see,
chat, but I can
hopefully
put
it's
it.
yeah.
And
You
you
can
have-
watch that's a short clip of the whole debate that scientists had, and I think they're atheist scientists that are talking about that. And another thing that I wanted to share is, I don't know if you guys have realized, but like Muslims, a lot of them see the Christian God, and none of them see the Muslim God. There's no testimony on the internet of a Muslim coming in contact with God and God telling him Christianity is wrong, come to Islam. But there's thousands of testimonies on the internet of Muslims coming in contact with God and realizing.
That just registered. Come to think of it, can you say that? That's just beautiful to hear. That's what's happening in Iran.
Yeah, that's what
that's
happened with
crazy.
James Storr. He was a Jewish. And James Storr is a popular biochemist, and he explained how he literally saw Jesus, like he got in contact with the literal Jesus Christ, like he was praying. Yeah, James Storr. Go on One for Israel and type James Storr. He's one of the most reputed scientists in the world, and he said that he was in contact straight with Jesus. Like,
And
he opened his eyes.
link to that or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's the most.
Please send it out and then in the chat or somewhere, so that I can also
Let
see
me
this
ask you
guy.
something about this superstring here. I've read recently something about that quarks. The deeper you go from quarks, you come. There are probably strings. Does that have something to? And these strings, they are not made of matter; they are just pure energy, and they are made of mathematics. That's something in the book of Tegmark, and maybe it has something to do with that.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure. This is like the beginning of that discovery. This is like cutting edge science now. So it doesn't have so much evidence as the DNA code has. You understand? They're still figuring out how this works, how there can be programming code at the base of the universe. So
Well, when they find that the universe was actually really complex, they came to the multiverse theory.
I
It's
wonder
all
what excuse they're
dodging.
going to use.
Yeah, they use the multiverse.
How are they going to excuse
Yeah, they
programming
use
code at the base of the
multiverse.
universe and at the base of
Yeah.
biology?
They
How are
use
they gonna-
multiverse, Martin.
No, no. You can't get programming code there is no evolution at the base of a universe.
No, they use multiverse. They say that there's
Yeah, but
there's.
that's the excuse they use for
I know that's what I'm
fine-tuning.
saying. It's an
That's fine
excuse.
tuning, but not that's
They
not
just say
the
there's
excuse they
billion of
use for
universe.
programming code.
They'll just say there's billion of universe. So one time it would happen that we have like all that complexity, but I just think it's fail. Like
Well,
nature will never produce an iPhone.
Well,
It's impossible.
I can probably agree with them that there's many universes and all of them have creators because we make a lot of universes, created worlds, and all of them have creators and all of them have programming code in them. So you understand? So I don't know where they have an example of a created world that was not created by intelligence. There is no such example.
Well, just in their imagination, they just gotta
No, they say
imagine.
we are the only example they can think of. We are special. We're the only example they can think of where programming code and everything comes into existence without an initial input of intelligence. So atheism doesn't make sense to me.
Well, atheism doesn't explain anything. Like they'll just say, I don't know. Like I actually watched a video from Intangelo, where he asking Matt Dillahunty, can you explain me? You know, he says nothing cannot create something, and Matt was like, can you prove that? And after like Intangelo was like, you know, nothing is the absence of anything. You know, and after you just see there was like 20 dislike on the video with 1 like. I mean, why would the atheist like?
Someone wants to join the stream.
Yeah. Martin,
Yeah.
did I pronounce your name correctly, Martin?
Yeah. Anything. Wait,
Can
my name
you
is.
type something in the chat? Are you able to do that?
Okay, I'll try.
If you can, I'm going to make you a moderator.
So we need to get the
I
chat.
put a
for
paste
this.
in.
Okay. I just added you.
So
Okay, thanks a lot.
we need to get the chat soon. We haven't. I tell you,
I
we're
subscribe
supposed.
to you.
I thought we were supposed to go to that biology book. So we should. I'll send you an email, and sometime we can get a chat. I've actually ordered The Origin of Life by what is his name again? Not Robert Carter. The Stairway to Life, and I've got the James Storr book too, and I've got Genetic Entropy. I thought they were probably going to be pretty good book to start with. Oh, you're muted, Saul.
Because I'm eating. My favorite ID book right now is Stairway to Life, and it's not even high. It's not even heavy on ID. It's just almost pure chemistry. And this is the reason I like it is we don't have to assume or prove that life is a code. They're able to just take the arguments directly from chemistry. And so we don't even get into a side discussion whether life is a code or not. You don't need to make that case. All you have to do is say, look at the chemistry. It doesn't agree with the naturalistic origin of life. It's very simple, but it's a brutal read. Oh my goodness, it was. And I reviewed the first version, which is even more technical.
And you know, something that I was realizing, as you know, I came to Christianity not too long ago, and when I started getting into evolution and creation, I was always scared to look at the evolutionist side, you know, to convince me that God wasn't true. And you know what I did? I'm like, you know, what am I gonna lose? I'm gonna look at the two side. I went on YouTube, I typed evidence for evolution, you know, I've watched a couple video proof supposed of evolution, and I was like, those proof can just be explained by intelligent design. I mean, it's just simple as that. It's like if you have two bone in a bird that are similar in human bone, I mean, what can you conclude? I mean, before Darwin, they were saying, well, it's kind of what we should expect, intelligent design, you know, same creator, same blueprint. And now it's just their worldview is just, it's common ancestor. It's just their worldview that's stuck in their head. They cannot get out.
But guys, I love programming, and I love looking at the programming code at the base of life. That you just see intelligence. It screams intelligence.
Yeah.
All the design strategies that's in it, and all the nanomolecular machines that read the code and carry out the commands, and how even DNA is copied. There's like multiple machines working on DNA to pull it apart and then copy it and then double check it to see if it's right. Now, how the flip do you get that without
Exactly.
intelligence?
Martin, do you like reading?
Not a lot.
I'll send you 3 gigabyte of book. I put it in private chat. There's around 3 gigabyte of creationist book there, all by good scientists. They're all
I
free.
like videos more because I can go super fast through a video. I watch videos at like 3 speed, like more than 2
Yeah,
speed.
take a look at what I put in the private chat. Click in it. It's a Google Drive. There's a bunch of book there, and you can read some if you want. Just
I can't
download
promise
it.
you all that I'll read it. Okay.
Yeah, just download them on your computer, and when you want to get them, just go read it. There's like around 3 gigabyte of book there.
You sure it's not a virus?
What?
You sure it's not a virus?
No, it's
gigabytes
not a
of virus.
virus. No, it's just it's a
Okay.
Google Drive link. No. I
Okay,
wouldn't
I'll
send a
check it.
virus to a Christian. No.
No, I'm just joking. Okay, I'll check it out. Yo, there's a lot of stuff.
You can see it's not a virus when you see a
Have you went through all of that you sent?
What?
That's quite a lot.
Oh,
Yeah.
Before I forget, Martine, how did you find our channel?
I was watching the debate, and then I came over to your channel, and I started watching what you guys were saying, because I was
Wow.
angry at Matt. And
Wow. Now, this made it worth the debate to meet you, guys like you. I can't. It was worth getting screamed at so I could meet you, Martin.
yeah, so luckily he screamed a lot at you. Otherwise, you would have met me. And you were very polite. You were so nice. You were almost too nice. Apologizing
some people
for
don't
everything.
understand this. Is that I genuinely am nice, but on the other hand, he was just making a jerk of himself. I said, just keep doing what you're doing. There's something that they don't realize is that they make Christians. I said, this is why atheists have such a bad reputation, because a lot of them behave like Matt. And I'm just like, well, thank you for kind of encouraging Christians not to listen to you, not to take you seriously, not to take your argument seriously, because you did an excellent job of it. It's kind of a mean thing to say. Greetings, Standing for Truth. You're welcome to join the stream, sir. We're having let me give you I'll provide a link here. And so
Perhaps
if you want to join and advertise your channel, I want to thank you for your support. So you're welcome to come in, because I'm kind of running out of gas, and I'd like people to have a chance to talk. So I just wanted to say it's really nice meeting you, Martine. We, if you don't mind saying, what time zone are you in? I'm in the Eastern time zone, the United States.
I'm in South Africa, so it's like 1 a.m. Yeah.
Oh my. Okay.
But I trained at night, so I'm fine.
So what I will do is, because I'm trying to I think I like having the afternoon hour to have shows. So we'll have stuff. So you're into programming, is that correct?
Well, I did a lot of programming, but I'm not like the best. I don't do programming anymore. I just do trading, like cryptocurrency trading and programming in that regard, but not a lot. But I like looking at programming code because I'm an industrial engineer. So I've done programming courses and so.
Well, the reason I wanted to ask you that is I'm trying to find out what material is good for this channel. And this gives me a chance to announce a sister channel. It's called Evidence Reasons Academy, where we actually focus on just more on just the pure academics, because just learning a little cell biology, a little chemistry, math, and physics will go a long way in understanding some of the arguments that I'm putting forward. So I may post some of those things here, but however this channel could be of service to you, I'd be thrilled. we will have hopefully some professional biochemists and professional molecular biologists coming here who are creationists. So, and we might be able to give talks and lectures and stuff. So if that's of interest to you,
Sounds cool.
okay, great. So I mean, you could see some of the things we've done. Some of the we can get anytime I say nerd talk or nerds go clubbing, any of those titles means this is going to be a very technical talk. So I try to identify that with capital letters, but I'm very honored to meet you.
I'm honored to meet you as well, but the only problem with me is that English is not my first language. So that's the only thing that keeps me back.
What language do you speak?
Afrikaans.
Ah, well, you speak lovely English, so don't worry.
No. I don't sound like Dr. Craig, so yeah. So if he was Afrikaans first language, he wouldn't have sound so great either. So he sounds very intelligent in English.
Well,
and you as well.
Will, did you have any thoughts? I'll keep the channel up.
There was something else about eukaryotes, and I didn't understand quite exactly what it was about, but it sounded interesting. I don't know if it was something that you said, Saul or Martin. Do you remember?
I'm not sure what you're talking about now.
It was something about eukaryotes which have some kind of programming, something like that.
Oh no, I was talking about nanomolecular machines at the base of life, like in the cells. There are a lot of machines that scientists have found, and we are even trying to build our own machines. Like scientists are trying to build their own nanomolecular machines.
Okay.
But
no,
they're
I thought
cheating.
you were
so much.
mentioning something particular, but I think you were saying that in general. Yes.
Yeah, I was also making a joke that I would debate Sal on who has the best evidence, me or him, for creator. but that was just like for fun, because I think I have quite good evidence. But according to the ACS, I have none. So
you're from South Africa?
Yeah, I'm from South Africa, so there's probably a lag while talking to you.
From where is Johannesburg or?
Close to Cape Town.
Okay.
At the point of the whole Africa.
Yeah,
I'm sitting there.
Yeah.
Africa is a wonderful place. I know they have like a great coconuts and like a good place. It's always nice to eat coconuts because here in Canada, like coconuts are really expensive.
Yeah, this is nice kite surfing spots here because everyone comes to South Africa for kite surfing, and yeah.
I wanted to say that since Martin, you're an industrial engineer, you probably see some like factory type processes.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot, and then I see the same thing in biology, and then I'm like,
exactly the same with me. I am a machine designer, Martin, and for me it's the same thing that brought me to compare biology with what I am doing as a machine designer. First is the project, and it goes to the factory, and then the project is realized, and that's perfect parallel to what we see in the cell, where the genome directs the assembly of the molecular machines, and in the end it makes the cell factories. So
and I'm the PhD biologist, right? I'm kidding. One day I'll make it there.
Are you studying for it?
I want to get into biology. Yes.
So you're not yet a doctor?
No, I have a big walk to get back in school. I mean, and after I'll be able to get there one day. Let's hope.
Yes, he hasn't. He has to get into college first, so we might try to do on my other channel just to have pure academics to help high school people. So let me make sure that see if SFT. Okay, hey SFT, if you want to advertise any of your events, go ahead. So if there's anything upcoming, my friend Rob Stadler will be on the Standing for Truth channel, and I'll be covering also the Stairway of Life. By the way, one of the benefits of debating Matt Dillahunty is now everyone wants to debate me.
That's it. That's a great.
And
That's
this will
a
be
great.
now. The reason I also do that is it gives me a chance to get some editorial review for either articles or even small booklets that I'm writing. So Matt gave me some good stuff. You know, I'll know how to frame Pascal's wager and then point out some things in the original writings of Pascal. And then he got me some juicy quotes. You know, I can point out how he responded about the blind beggar. I said, well, this is, you know, okay, that's how some people will deal with it. And I could point out that he's not 100% certain because he just said that. And I can point out that he doesn't think atheism can offer anything to a Christian except, well, he gave some explanation, which I didn't think was very good.
But I think that is the way how we learn, Sal. I mean, with these responses, then you have to think about how do you respond to these arguments. And that brings you sometimes to not only one issue, but several new issues which you can investigate. And that makes us moving forward and increase our knowledge.
Yeah. So Sphincter of Doom, he said, I like to debate you on origin of life. So I said, can we have a 10-hour debate? It'll be a series. And he agreed. I'm just like, oh my goodness, we're going to actually have a real discussion here. Where, okay, so let's go through the papers. What I'm going to do is just go through Stairway of Life and say, okay, why is this wrong? So this will be a great chance for me to review and learn and get. So these debates are not going to be high profile to do advertising of who I am. This is now practice sessions to see how well I can articulate something. And the goal of these debates is not to persuade anyone. David Neff wants to debate me on some things, and I'll do that. It's, you know, it'll be a learning process. And he's a very nice gentleman, and so that's why I'm happy to do that. So now with the 10-hour debate, it's like, okay, how much cutting off are you going to do to your opponent? I mean, people just will not put up with that for 10 hours.
I would.
I wouldn't. I'd say, well, this is going nowhere. So if it ends up being the way that I'm hoping it plays out, where we actually start to go through papers and textbook chemistry, then I think this will be very productive, because now we get into the details. Because that's the thing, that a short debate, you know, your opponent can cut you off and just disrupt and distract. And just pull out stuff that's not even true. And in a protracted debate where you have like a series of, you know, like we meet the next time, you can fact check and you can come back, you can have opening statements. You can say, this is what my opponent said, all of this was wrong. And in my debate with Dr. Dan, hang on, Will. In my debate with Dr. Dan, it was providential that it got cut off, because James had to, it was supposed to be only one part, but it ended up being two parts because James had a little scheduling conflict. It gave me 5 weeks to review the tape. I said, oh my goodness, look at all the things that he said. I'm going to call him out on it. So the second round was way better. And I don't think he'd last the third round. But even in the first round, I asked him a very simple question. I said, do you think the human genome is improving? And as far as I could tell, he totally dodged the question. I mean, a simple yes or no. And I said, okay, all these people are concerned about the human genome deteriorating. I said, what do you think? Do you think the human genome's improving? That's how I framed it. He dodged the question. So that's why I like the long debates, because they're in less a position to be pulling stunts like Matt Dillahunty, because that's all they can really do at that point. When he was just losing his temper, I said he's run out of ammunition. Will, go ahead. I cut you off. Thank you.
Oh no, it's all good. Yeah, I just wanted to say the thing that I find better with like long debate and all that type of stuff. You have more time to put stuff on the table, and really goes around like specific stuff. And I think that's gonna be. You wanted to do it on the origin of life. Is that correct, Sal?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be that would be amazing.
Yeah. Can you imagine 10 hours?
I would
And
watch it all, to be honest.
So I'll get him. So really the simple rule, equal time. And if he doesn't like, we'll just see how it plays out. I'm grateful he, is giving me a chance to articulate. And my goal is, I have no idea where this is going. We're just going to try it. So he's the first that accepted a 10-hour debate. And
how do you plan for that? Like, how many bathroom trips and
what?
you take breaks? Do you take breaks every 3 hours?
What we said is going to be a series. So I'm going to suggest maybe five 2-hour sessions.
Okay.
So like 2 hours, and then we have a week off, and we could think about what we said, what someone else said. That's what I'm going to suggest. I said, we'll just do this like scholars. You put stuff on the table. It's not going to be theater. If he wants theater, I'm not into that. But we'll at least try it. And we have to just choose the venue. I'm probably going to, if Dapper Dino wants to host it, I'd be very honored. He and I have a good relationship. Interestingly, by the way, Dapper, if you're listening, I just want to say my heart goes out to you. You're in my thoughts and prayers, brother. And Dapper Dino, we're going to trade. At least we tried to do a little horse trading. I said, I'll do a talk against creationists using the second law of thermodynamics. I said, I hope we can do a joint talk on Richard Carrier and the mythicist. Dapper Dino is actually pretty critical of Richard Carrier. And I said, this is going to be really fun. Someone who's been just hammering against the creationists, he's actually going to be kind of a little bit on the side of the Christians on this. He's kind of like Danny, in that Danny's an atheist and he was fighting against Dillahunty. And that's why if an atheist is seeing that, like Danny, that means more to me that Matt Dillahunty was wrong, if even someone on his side is calling him out on it. And so I don't know where Dapper Dino is in his personal beliefs, and he's made a point of not trying to bring it up, and I'm going to totally respect that. We're going to have hopefully a scholarly discussion and say, what do you think of Richard Carrier's views? That should be a lot of fun. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So go ahead.
That's always fun to look at the two side, and you just determine by your, but what you have seen the evidence, and he goes on and you do research, and sometimes when you look at the two side, let's say an evolutionist brought up, like, let's just say like protein evolution or something like that, you go look into papers, article about what people says about it, and you just goes from the information over there. I just think the best way to like really learn from my own experience is just not to only look at the creationist side, to really look at debate, because you got to be ready to know what people are going to bring to you, against creationists. And I think there's a lot of problem for creationism and same for evolution on both two sides, and we just got to resolve those and goes from there.
Can I Usi Alku? Usi Alku. Welcome to the. I think I've seen you on the channel, and greetings and thank you for your comments. Said on the origin of life, what were some processes and mechanisms of special creation, more than just God spoke it and poof, swirls of dust and fireworks? Can you get specific at all? No, I can't get specific at all. Because the postulation is that this is not a process that involved anything natural. And I'm just going to argue that based on what we know from science, as a matter of principle, it couldn't involve anything natural. Just like we don't expect tornadoes passing through a junkyard and creating 747s. There's certain principles there. Now, so formally speaking, we could just say it's improbable. That's all I'm going to argue. That it's unreasonable to expect a natural process to do this. How is that not scientific? What you make of it is perhaps beyond science. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Because it could well be, and this is what scientists don't like doing, is if the best explanation is something a human mind could never comprehend or replicate in the lab, that makes people feel uncomfortable, because we do like to believe in things we can understand and control. I totally get that. But what if it is really presumptuous to think that we can explain everything in terms of mechanisms we understand and can control and repeat? And I will just make the case that it involved mechanisms that we possibly cannot ever understand, control, and repeat. So a decision that individuals perhaps like you have to make is, are you willing to believe in only things that you can control, repeat, and understand? If that's the case, it's like, well, okay, I'll respect that, but you may end up with a totally wrong answer. But I will point out what's happening is you have people like Eugene Koonin that have to appeal to multiple universes we can never see, never verify, never know, never prove, to explain the origin of life. That's how bad it has gotten. We don't need those kind of outrageous arguments to explain ordinary chemistry for simple molecules like, say, water, H2O. You take hydrogen and oxygen and it'll react. You'll get that molecule. You don't need multiple universes to explain molecules like that. But evolutionary biologists like Koonin have to appeal to entities that they essentially can't verify, control, repeat, or understand, or know. So how is that different than creationism? That's what I'm going to point out.
Yep. All right. So thanks for having me in. I'm gonna be hopping off. I got some work to do, and I got some math to do too. And I'll be in touch with you in email, because we got to get something going on.
All righty.
A couple of weeks.
Well, thank you for your forbearance. As you could tell, I've been pretty busy, and especially why Emery is on semester break. I really wanted to get a hold of him. For those that don't know, we're privileged to have Emery Moyna. He's a graduate student in biology. He's a creationist. And I'm really glad. There's just kind of a growing number of creationist graduate students, biology students, and professors now that are creationists.
I'll be part of it.
God willing, yes. Amen.
I really hope, Sal, your mother's doing good during those time, and I hope you're doing good too. I've prayed for her, and may God reach her heart and put peace inside of her. And
thank you.
This time shall become when it's the will of God. And
thank you. All right, I'll see you later.
Yeah, God bless everyone in the stream. Do stay safe. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So maybe I'll close down the stream in a little bit. Do you have any thoughts, gentlemen?
No, I think I will leave too.
Perhaps one last thing, perhaps that I want to share is I've watched a lot of Matt's debates, and he asks for evidence, and sometimes he gets the evidence virtually. They give him the evidence. They say he asked for someone's hand to grow back as evidence for God, and then they say, okay, what if this happens, that someone's hands grows back? And then he starts explaining away the evidence. Well, we know in nature that some animals have the ability to grow back a limb. And so he asks for evidence, and then he immediately tries to explain it away. You understand?
Now, for me, the turning point to understand that no evidence will convince him was at the debate that he had with, I forgot the name. He has a channel, Trinity Radio, Braxton Hunter. And then I did send him in the chat of the YouTube video some evidence of the odds to have the first living cell, And then he said literally, "Oh, bring me some evidence." So he literally dodged it. And when he made that, then I said, "Well, this guy isn't serious, because, I mean, this is simply knockdown evidence which cannot be denied by anyone. And if this guy denies it, then he's not serious. Then nothing can convince him." And since then, I see him in other eyes, you know.
Yeah, I think he really doesn't want to believe so badly.
Yeah.
He doesn't want it to be true. He's perhaps an anti-theist. Or
Well, if I could say, I mean, that's about the level of investment I want to invest on Matt Dillahunty. There's so many interesting things to work on. Just to appraise you on my work, Martin. I'm a molecular biophysics research assistant, and for 7 years I was working for a famous geneticist, John Sanford, and it on a variety of projects. My specialty has been proteins, and I'm now working on a criticism of eukaryotic evolution, and so you'll see that on the channel. And so to be able to do that well, I'm just not going to invest too much time listening to that. I mean, I listen to it because I know that there are Christians out there that think his arguments are compelling, and I want to respect that, because there are people that are suffering out there, and they feel abandoned by God, and I totally get that, because I've been there, and Matt Dillahunty plays into that really well. So
I wanted to say something which I forgot previously. There was recently a call, Sal, where someone from Pakistan called in at the Atheist Experience, and he said, "Well, I'm an atheist, but I know inside of me that God exists, and I hate him so much, and I literally can't do anything to remove this sentiment inside of me. And I really want to get rid of God, and I'm unable to, because I know he exists and he will punish me for hell because I don't want to believe in him." And they were just simply shaking their heads, and they said, "Well, we have here recovery from religion. You can call in, and then we'll deal with that." But then I was thinking, that's incredibly how can I say, irresponsible, because they did not help that guy, that poor guy, at all.
So what can you start off? I missed. You said a guy from Pakistan called in, and what did he say? I'm sorry, Otangelo.
That he felt inside of him that God exists, but he didn't want to have anything to do with him because God screwed up his life. And he said, "What can I do to get rid of that sentiment that God exists, and that when I die, he will punish me because I do not want to have anything to do with him?" And they could not answer to him. And I said, "Well, first of all, the guy made a mistake because he called at the wrong place. And secondly, they were completely unable to handle that situation, And of course, if he would have called into, if he would have gone to an evangelical church or something like that, then they could have done some explanation that God loves him and that he can find salvation and find peace with God. That's what he needs to hear. And the only thing at that moment that I could do was just to pray for the guy, and hope that God can direct him to someone which can give him a solution. Otherwise, this guy will suffer."
What did he claim God did to him?
He said that God screwed up his life. He didn't go into details, but he said that he was unable to get rid of the sensation and the knowledge that God exists, and that when he dies, he will suffer in hell.
Wow. And the problem of evil runs deep. And I mentioned this before. I was visiting college campuses and just trying to listen to the students and trying to see, not so much preach to them. I wanted to hear what their problems were and maybe see how I could be of help. Probably the thing that stands out in my mind about 10 years ago, a young lady was upset with her peers because they're making insensitive comments, and then she confessed. She said the reason that it really hurt her to hear what her peers were saying is she was a victim of an assault. And I don't need to go into detail. You understand what I mean. I try to keep this relatively family friendly, but she was just in tears when she confessed it before me and my acquaintances. She was an atheist agnostic, and I said, I just remember being just speechless because I didn't know what to say except just offer my sympathy and support. And sometimes really hard to think how you could share the love of Jesus with someone like that and say, you know, if you believe in God, you can experience God's love. And that's something that's very challenging. I'm just saying I'm very sensitive to people like that. It's not, you know, I don't want to condemn them for feeling bitter. And that's something that they'll have to work through. Probably the hardest thing is that when people convert, they may have to accept that their loved ones didn't know the Lord. Could be their parents or children. I think that's probably the hardest thing I ever want to, you know, I don't know how to lessen the pain if they have to come to that realization. So these people from other countries with other religions, the Muslims that become Christians, and they say, yeah, their parents died without believing in Jesus. That's very challenging, and I just respect them because that's hard.
Yeah. That is really hard. I think people go through a lot of bad stuff in this life. I think this is like hell and heaven mixed together. So, and I think it's going to be separated at the end. But yeah, it's quite sad out to see so many people deceived and so many people heading to destruction, blowing up themselves, thinking they're doing God's will and stuff like that. It's quite sad.
Yeah. So I don't know where I was headed with that. Gentlemen, I'll give you the last word, and then I'm just going to shut down the stream. Thank you for joining, and Martin, it's been a real pleasure
It's a pleasure to meet you as well.
And Tangela, we'll talk eukaryotes or something someday. As you can see, I've been kind of backlogged trying to get co-hosts, especially while Emery's free for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was fun watching you, and I'll probably watch more videos of you and probably get to know your arguments and learn a few new things.
Besides that video which you on YouTube, do you have something else, other literature or information?
I have
papers?
like so many videos of evidence that I've made into a like I watch a lot of YouTube videos, like thousands and thousands and thousands. I watch at like 3 speed, like 2.6 speed. It's higher than YouTube allows, but I'm able to do it. And so I watch so many videos, and then I find evidence and I put it in. But sometimes the evidence they ban the evidence. I don't know why, but they block the video and then sometimes I lose some of the evidence. But I have a lot of stuff that I would share with you if you want. I can show you the machines that I was talking about and stuff like that.
Now, what was very interesting, and I will see the video that you linked to, is about algorithms at the bottom of the universe in quantum mechanics and that kind of stuff. I'm collecting information on that. I'll leave my email. Maybe you can exchange with me some about this stuff. That would be great.
Sure. Or you can just comment on my YouTube channel. But my YouTube channel is quite dead because I sometimes talk to atheists and then they come and hate me and downvote everything I've posted all my life. So I tried to help them and then they hate me for it. I did one debate and then my whole channel, I never had a downvote in my life, and then my whole channel was just full of downvotes. But my channel is actually just for me and my friends. So most of the videos there.
So what is your channel? What is your channel?
Just click on my name there. Or can't you? You see Martin in the chat or not? I'll say
yes.
Hi.
The name of your
You see
channel
me?
is just Martin?
Martin Henning.
Just Martin?
But I have
or
another channel that I actually post in the future. I'm going to post stuff there, but it's not quite
Is
ready.
it Martin Schrader?
Martin Henning. You can see in the comment section or the chat section. My name is there.
Let me check
You
here.
see it? So then just text me something. Text me what kind of evidence you want, and I'll provide it to you.
Can you put a link to your channel? Because I don't find it.
Can't you click on me and or let me see. I'll post
You-
you a link.
Martin Henning. Okay, now I got it. If I put there
Yeah,
and
but-
search, then I'll find your channel. Is that correct?
There's 2 Martin Hennings. Just watch out. Mine. I'm sitting on a boat.
You are
So you'll
sitting
see
on
me
the
on the
boat?
boat. Yeah. Do you see me on a
Okay. The first
on a
one,
boat?
fun, I guess.
Yeah. It's an
Okay.
old channel that I made when I was still quite young.
Okay. All right.
So I'll then share anything you want, all the evidence you want. I'll give you lots. I have lots.
I'll just put my email in the hi tube jump. I'll put my email there, and maybe we can keep in touch through that.
Okay, cool. You can. Where do I see it? Okay, I see your email there. Audio
Okay.
voice 8888.
Yes, that's my email.
Okay.
I have
awesome.
an email list where I exchange information on abiogenesis. If that is of interest for you, I can include you in the list.
Yeah, sure. You can send me. I'm always open to new kinds of evidence. I think the rest of my life, I'm gonna find new evidence because new discoveries are always being made, and like science is like studying God's fingerprints. You're studying the world. You're studying God's fingerprints. So
Exactly.
more and more evidence is being found, I think, all the time.
Yeah, that's true, and that's our adventure.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to be fun, and that's inspiring me to do some talks on biophysics, which is one of the things I really love is biophysics. I'm really not into studying more evolutionary biology. So, Otangelo, we might cover eukaryotic evolution and the ATP synthesis. The ATP synthesis in the mitochondria, I think 85% of the genes come from the nucleus. It has to go through the nuclear pore and has all these localization codes.
Wow. Yeah.
And this would be just an awesome. So I'm thinking of making a presentation to some faculty in a private meeting and trying to get it vetted. But you and I could probably develop that. We'll just go. Maybe we'll have a session where we go through this because Emery is more of a morphological guy. He's not into cellular biology like you. So I think you and I could do this. And besides, you'll have less. I feel kind of sad. You're investing a lot of time over there at Speed of Sound's channel. You'll have more freedom here, and then Speed of Sound will have more weather reports he has to make almost every day. So we're going to give him a lot. We're going to keep him really busy, just trying to debunk what we say. And because I appreciate you showing up on his channel. Before I say goodbye to everyone, I can't go through all the comments here, but I'd like to acknowledge Praise for visiting. Thank you, Praise. Honesty Angel, Brandon, Doki. Don't know what we do without you, and Top Dog, and Redefine Living. Brandon, I'm just going through the list here. Ian, thank you so much for visiting. And Happy New Year to you. Daniel, I'm sorry if I'm repeating names. I'm just going through the list as quickly as I can. Martino, Tangelo, it's been great seeing you. And until we meet again, have a very blessed day. So, Lord willing, we'll meet again on this channel. Take care, and God
Cheers,
bless
Sal.
you.
You're the
Bye,
best.
guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.